Windows of the Mind by Frank Brennan.
A fine wine. Extraordinary. Quite extraordinary. Daniel Appleby did not often use such words to describe the wines he tasted. The other man in the room was waiting to see if he liked this one or not. His future depended on what Daniel Appleby said. If he liked the wine, it would be bought by one of the biggest supermarkets around. It would be sold everywhere. The man who owned the vineyard looked on nervously. His vineyard was small, but it was one of the oldest in the Bordeaux region of France. If he sold his wine, the business that had been in his family for over 200 years would be saved. Daniel Appleby held the glass to his nose and smelled the wine again. He lifted the glass up to the light from the window to see its color better. He was the chief wine taster for Happy Mart supermarkets. If he liked a wine, then everybody bought it. If he didn't like a wine, nobody did. His word was like the judgment of God. "You say you have been making this wine for the last 200 years?" he asked the other man, Monsieur Colbert, a proud-looking man of over 70 years of age, whose hair was still as black as it had been when he was 20. "I am old, but I am not that old, sir," Monsieur Colbert said with a little smile. "But my family has been making this wine since the time of Napoleon Bonaparte. If I may say so, this is the only vineyard in all of France to produce wine in this way. It is my secret." Monsieur Colbert was hoping that his little joke might relax things a little. Daniel Appleby took his profession very seriously. He was the best. He never, ever joked when he tasted wine. He might joke about other wine tasters at other times. In fact, he often did. But he never joked during a wine tasting. It was too important. He was too important. He held the glass up to the light once more and looked at the deep red color before finally putting the glass onto the table in front of him. He had made up his mind. "Monsieur Colbert," he said, as he placed his thumbs into the pockets of the red jacket he wore, the one that matched his tie so well. "You are to be congratulated. This is an exceptionally fine wine, with a strong bouquet and a rich, fruity flavor, with suggestions of blackcurrant. A wine to go well with any game or red meat, or to be enjoyed on its own for its excellent and strong personality." Monsieur Colbert smiled with delight. This was just what he had hoped to hear. "But," Daniel Appleby went on as he took out his glasses from the pocket of his expensive jacket and put them on again, "is this the right kind of wine for the customers of Happy Mart supermarkets? They're used to wines that cannot compare with this quality. Their tastes are less well-developed than those of people such as ourselves. I wonder if they would fully enjoy the finer qualities of this remarkable wine. I wonder if they would be prepared to pay more for such quality." The old man's smile disappeared. Monsieur Colbert was proud of his wine, but he was not a rich man. He had to sell his wine or go out of business. He was getting old, and he owed a lot of money. He needed money if he was to retire with his wife, whose health had never been good since their only son, Jacques, had died 2 years before. This could be their last chance. "I promise you, Monsieur Appleby, that my wine is worth every franc. There is no better wine of this type in the region." Daniel Appleby smiled and picked up the glass again, holding it up against his fleshy nose and allowing the edge of the glass to brush against his neat, sandy moustache. He breathed in deeply through his nose and sighed. "Ah, you're right, Monsieur Colbert. This is one of the best wines I have ever tasted." He stopped for a moment to think of the numerous examples of wine that had passed his lips. This was by far the finest. None of the others could compare with it. And it would be great to add this to the Happy Mart wine list. His wine list. But it would have to be on his terms, of course. "But," he continued, "there is little demand for expensive fine wines, not in our type of supermarkets. Oh, there are wealthy men who will always pay for quality, that is true, but are there enough, Monsieur Colbert, are there enough? The customer of today is the ordinary shopper, not the rich man. And there are a great many more ordinary shoppers than there are millionaires. The shoppers are the ones who make our money for us, monsieur, and we have to please them, you can be sure of that." "Just what exactly are you saying, Monsieur Appleby? Are you refusing to buy my wine because it is too good?" asked Monsieur Colbert, his voice showing more anger than he had intended. Times had been bad, and his small vineyard had always depended on the high prices that wines of superior quality fetch. But fewer people were prepared to pay for such luxuries now, and he knew that the Englishman from the supermarket was quite aware of this. He didn't want to lose his business completely. He would have to see what he was offered and hope for the best. "I am saying, monsieur," said Appleby finally, "that Happy Mart supermarkets always try to offer the best value for their customers. We are experts at selling for the best prices on the market, and you are expert at making quality wine. I say we can combine our abilities and offer our customers the finest wines at prices they can afford." Monsieur Colbert was not familiar with Appleby's way of doing business. He liked people to be direct and open when they were dealing with him. "And what exactly are your terms, Monsieur Appleby?" he asked. Daniel Appleby played with his glass as he spoke, admiring the rich, dark colour of the wine as he held it up to the light from the window. He was used to moments like this, and enjoyed them almost as much as the fine wines he loved. "My terms are the terms Happy Mart offers to all the smaller vineyards it does business with. We like to see fine wines made, but we are realistic about today's market. We offer to buy your vineyard from you and take the responsibility from your hands while employing you to be in charge of wine production." "But, monsieur..." Monsieur Colbert did not like the sound of the idea. "Well, naturally we wouldn't expect you to produce the wine by yourself. Our expert production staff would work under your direction. That way you have the best of everything. You continue to make wine, but you have the money from the sale of your vineyard and a contract from Happy Mart too. A very fine offer, I think you'll agree." What Appleby didn't mention was that once the production staff had learned everything about Colbert's ways of producing his wine, Happy Mart would find some reason to get rid of him. Old Monsieur Colbert spoke again. "This vineyard has been in my family for generations, monsieur. It means a lot to me and the honor of my family name. What price are you offering for a wine which was good enough for the emperor?" Daniel Appleby took a taxi from the airport to his expensive flat in London. He was happy with the way things had gone. It had been just like all the other times. Sometimes the small vineyards produced wines that sold well, and sometimes they didn't, but Happy Mart always made money. If the vineyards didn't make enough money, Happy Mart could always sell them again. There was always some way to make money. If the previous owners were not left with any way of making a living, it was not Happy Mart's problem. That was the way of the world. Daniel Appleby was looking forward to a new future with the Happy Mart Company. He had been invited to be the presenter in a television show Happy Mart were paying for. It was a show all about food and drink, called Dinner Party, and he would be the show's expert on wines. He would be able to do what he had always wanted, to spend all of his time eating and drinking the finest food and wine. He would show off his expert knowledge, thoroughly enjoy himself, and he would be paid very well. Yes, he had everything planned. His future looked bright. Soon he would no longer have to taste all the awful cheap wines Happy Mart usually sold to its stupid customers. He looked at the lights of the city as the evening sun was setting. The sky was yellow and orange and red. It was beautiful. Unfortunately, he didn't notice the other car as it lost control and crashed into his taxi. The doctors all agreed that Daniel Appleby was a lucky man. He had hit his head against the taxi door and had been knocked out. The taxi driver had escaped with cuts and bruises. Even the taxi had not been damaged beyond repair. The only sign of the accident left on Daniel was a small cut just above his nose. It could have been a lot worse. Daniel had to stay in hospital for a day for observation, just to make sure that he was all right. He did not really mind. The only thing Daniel was not looking forward to was hospital food. The food served by hospitals was plain and very different from the kind of cooking he was used to. He did not mind plain food, a nice lobster cooked in its shell, or perhaps a simple steak served with a basic green salad. Maybe just fresh bread with a good cheese and a glass of cool white wine. He was willing to go without when he had to. When his first meal arrived, he was horrified. It was burger, chips and peas with a glass of orange juice. It looked awful. It tasted worse. Daniel had to call the nurse. "Nurse," he told her, "this burger tastes like salty cardboard. The chips are like soap, the peas are tasteless and hard, and the orange juice is like old vinegar. Don't you have any fresh food here? Are you trying to play some kind of joke on me, or what?" The nurse took away the food, and he was brought a salad instead. Once again, Daniel Appleby complained that his food had no proper taste. The nurse had the food checked by the manager of the kitchen. The manager said it all tasted fine. "That manager's tongue must be made out of rubber," Daniel replied in disgust. The doctor was called, and tests were made immediately on Daniel to see if anything was wrong. There was something wrong. The accident had caused some bleeding in Daniel's brain. It had damaged the part of his brain that controlled his sense of smell. The result was that Daniel had almost completely lost his ability to smell things. Because the sense of taste depends very much on smell, all he had now were 3 basic tastes: salt, sweet, and bitter. He couldn't taste anything else. He could still enjoy the color and feel of food, but none of it would taste of anything more than those 3 basic tastes, no matter what the food or drink was. That's what the doctor told him. But apart from that, he was fine. "Of course I'm fine. Now, can I go home?" he asked impatiently. The doctor told him he could, and that was what he did. But this time he went home on the bus. The first thing he did when he got home was book a table at his favourite French restaurant. He did not believe for one moment that his famous nose and tongue were no longer as sensitive as they used to be. It had only been a minor accident. No, a good meal, a glass of good wine, and he would soon be back to his old ways. As for hospital food, well, everybody knows what that is like. It always tastes disgusting. In fact, cardboard would be an improvement on that awful rubbish. After a bath and a shave, he was all ready. He put on his favourite clothes, including his spotted tie and red jacket. He was looking forward to his meal. As always, before eating out, he drank nothing stronger than water. He did not want any other tastes to spoil the sensitivity of his tongue. He had also arranged to meet Justin, his immediate boss, and one of Happy Mart's chief marketing managers. Justin had left a message on his answer phone. He wanted to know if the Bordeaux business with old Colbert had been successful. Well, he would tell him the good news over a delicious meal. They had the best table, the one overlooking the river. Daniel recommended the veal with truffles and new potatoes in garlic butter. But first, they must have Henri's famous onion soup. Henri was the best maker of soups in the business. The restaurant had brought him all the way from Provence in France just to make soups for them. When the soup arrived, he waited for Justin to taste first. They had both turned down an aperitif and had drunk only mineral water to begin with. They had their wine glasses filled with wine from Burgundy, but they would only drink it after the soup. They didn't want to spoil it. Justin tasted. He was a tall man of about 35 with neat blonde hair and a body which had once been fit but had got fatter with lots of good food. He wore an expensive suit and had the look of a man who was used to getting his own way. He was almost as fond of good food and wine as Daniel. In fact, it had been Justin's idea to produce Dinner Party for television with Daniel as one of its stars. "Daniel, my dear boy, this soup is fantastic. Henri has never made better." Daniel smiled. Good old Henri. He took a spoonful of soup and put it into his mouth. He waited a moment for the heat of the soup to go down a little, while his tongue took in the flavour. Salt. All he could taste was salt. It tasted so terrible that he nearly spat out the soup. Justin noticed. "Daniel, whatever is the matter? Are you all right?" Justin, he observed, had already swallowed 2 spoonfuls of the soup. Justin's taste was almost as expert as Daniel's, yet he had liked it. Could those doctors have been right? Had he really lost his famous sense of taste? These thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. This was hardly the time to admit anything about the loss of his sense of taste, not to a man who was going to give him a job that depended on it. He would have to pretend nothing was the matter. After all, Henri's soup could always be depended on. It was always excellent. Nothing, he told Justin. Just a little something in the throat. This soup is delicious. Do finish it. Justin smiled and finished his soup. He then praised the Burgundy, a wine that was a particular favourite of Daniel's, though tonight it tasted like warm vinegar as far as he could tell. In fact, it tasted so horrible that he had to try very hard not to spit it out. But he drank it. They talked as they ate, and Daniel told Justin about old Colbert's wine. Justin seemed delighted and was looking forward to tasting it. He asked Daniel to bring some to the Happy Mart office the next day for a tasting of some of the new wines Happy Mart had recently bought. Justin liked to try all the new wines before they went on sale, and it was a good way for Happy Mart's wine tasters to practice. Justin also knew that Daniel loved to show off in front of the other tasters. It was expected.
"Why, of course,"
Daniel answered. But he was beginning to be afraid. The veal, which Justin was now finding so tasty, was just a salty piece of soft stuff in his mouth. He might just as well be eating the insides of a cushion, but he dare not tell Justin. The thought of attempting a wine tasting, an occasion he would normally look forward to, now filled him with fear. He would need time to do something. He had to act quickly.
"But wouldn't it be better, Justin, if we had the wine tasting at a later date?" he suggested.
"Daniel, my boy, why ever would you want to do that? Don't you want to show off your abilities to your employers?" The way Justin emphasized the word employers sounded almost threatening. Justin was not used to his arrangements being disturbed. If Daniel had a reason to change his plans, it had better be good. Daniel had to think quickly. He knew that Justin wouldn't want him on his television show if he knew about his problem. He might even find a reason to make him leave Happy Mart completely. An idea formed in Daniel's mind. A desperate one, but it came out of his mouth before he could stop it.
To give us time to bring over our new employee, Monsieur Colbert," said Daniel. "Old Colbert makes some of the best wines in the world. Perhaps he would be a good man to test out our wines as well as myself. After all, if he is to supervise our new vineyard, it would be a good idea to get his expert advice on other wines, wouldn't it?"
Justin sensed that something was not right, but didn't know what it was. He didn't really like Daniel, but had always respected his abilities as a wine taster, even if he thought Daniel was greedy, with too high an opinion of himself. But, of course, if he wasn't able to do the job anymore, then there was no reason to keep him on.
"Why, Daniel, I never thought I'd hear you tell me that you valued somebody else's opinion above your own. You must be losing your abilities."
"Not at all." Daniel thought that old Colbert was sure to have a good nose for wines. In his business, he had to have. He could simply agree with everything Colbert said. That would stop people finding out about him and save him from a huge embarrassment. He could pretend there was nothing wrong with him and just judge wines on their colour and feel. You could tell a lot about wines that way if you knew what to look for, as he did. Yes, he could use old Colbert to get him out of this mess until his sense of taste got back to normal. But that would be soon, he was sure.
"Oh, all right, Daniel. I'll leave the arrangements to you. Bring him over, fix a date, and I'll get the wines. But, Daniel—"
"Yes, Justin?"
"Don't make a habit of this, okay?"
Daniel went to see the doctor again. He had been certain that his condition was just temporary, but now he wasn't so sure. Would he ever get his sense of smell and taste back to normal? He had to know. His future career depended on it.
"There's no way of knowing, Mr. Appleby," said the doctor. "In most cases I'd say no, but your brain suffered very little damage. It might recover, but I can't be sure. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful than that."
That evening at home, Daniel did something he very rarely did. He got drunk. He got drunk at home on brandy he could not taste. The next morning he had a terrible headache, and he stayed at home. Daniel Appleby had to face the fact that his future now depended on Colbert. He didn't like the idea, but maybe he could use him. After all, He had saved his vineyard for him. It would go on making his beautiful wines. The fact that the old vineyard was now owned by Happy Mart, and the old man was now just an employee, wasn't important. At least Daniel didn't think so. And if he could get the old man to help him, nobody need know about his loss of taste. Surely, thought Daniel, old Colbert could understand the pride we wine tasters have in our profession. After all, he's a proud man himself, in his way. Daniel guessed that Colbert, like most wine experts, would love to try what other wines were on offer. In any case, he knew that Colbert would be needed to instruct Happy Mart specialists on the methods he used to produce his wine. Daniel decided to risk it. He would tell Colbert everything about his accident and his loss of taste. Besides, Colbert owed him a favour, didn't he? But just to be sure, he would tell him that he would get him sacked from his new job if he didn't help. He couldn't refuse then. He would get on the telephone and speak to him right away. No problem. The next few days saw Daniel Appleby busily making arrangements over the telephone with old Colbert, who agreed to be there in 2 weeks. Thank goodness. A week later, Daniel got a phone call from Justin. He had just tasted some of old Colbert's wine, and he was very excited about it. "Daniel, my boy, I knew it must be good because of what you said, but I never realized it would be this good. Once we start producing this, we'll create a whole new market for quality wine. Everybody will want it. And you must get Monsieur Colbert to bring any more of these wonderful wines he may have. The man is simply brilliant. You are a clever old thing, Daniel, but then you are the best in the business. Happy Mart is lucky to have you. I am looking forward to meeting Monsieur Colbert next week. I've invited people from the television company, photographers from the best newspapers, everybody. Don't disappoint me, Daniel, because this is going to be big." Daniel was glad to hear Justin praising him again, but he had not got back his senses of taste or smell. He had had to pretend that he still had his famous nose for wine, whereas he had actually been depending on his eyes and his experience in order to do his job. It hadn't been easy. Old Colbert was going to arrive soon, and he realized that he really would need the old man for the wine tasting. He was not happy about that. Old Colbert was not used to dressing up in suits. He felt uncomfortable in a tie. He would much rather be in his old shirt, looking after his vineyard. He couldn't help thinking of it as still being his vineyard, though he knew it was no longer. Instead, here he was at the Happy Mart offices in London, being introduced to a room full of men like Daniel Appleby. And there was Appleby himself, wearing his ridiculous red jacket, smiling and holding a corkscrew. He was busy telling everybody all about Monsieur Colbert's marvellous wines, and how lucky he had been to be the man who had discovered them. Appleby had told Colbert he owed him a favour, and Colbert was not a man who forgot to pay back what he owed. Not at all. Justin was smiling as he stood by the table full of empty wine glasses. He tapped a glass on the table with a spoon. It was surprisingly loud. Everybody turned around to look. "Gentlemen," he said, "Monsieur Colbert has kindly agreed to bring along some more of his wonderful wines for us to taste today. This promises to be a treat indeed. Daniel, if you would be so kind." Daniel turned to Colbert, who then handed Daniel one of the bottles he had brought with him. "This is one we made recently, monsieur," said Colbert. "Shall we taste it first?" Daniel smiled as he pulled out the cork and poured out a measure for the old man. Justin had insisted that Daniel take charge of the wine tasting. It was his way of saying he trusted him. Fine, that suited Daniel. Now he could make sure that the wine was completely under his control, just as he wanted. The photographers were all taking pictures, and television cameras were pointing at him. Good. He was enjoying himself. Colbert lifted up his glass, smelled the liquid first, tasted it, then spat it from his mouth into a small metal bucket kept on the table at such occasions. He looked at Daniel and gave a little nod, barely noticeable to anybody else. That was the signal he had arranged with Colbert. Now he could start showing off.
My friends, Monsieur Colbert has been good enough to allow me to be the first to taste the latest wine from the Colbert vineyard.
Daniel paused to pour out a measure into his own glass from the newly opened bottle.
If you would allow me.
Daniel did what everybody had come to expect of him. He smelled the glass with his expert nose, breathed deeply, then took a mouthful of the deep red liquid, taking care to roll it carefully around his mouth before spitting it into a bucket. Everybody waited while he looked upwards, as he always did before giving his judgment on a wine. Finally, he spoke.
This wine is truly a fine example of a great wine, full of fruit and with excellent body. It is to wine what a Picasso painting is to art, a true masterpiece. One cannot taste a wine like this and not feel that one has tasted greatness. Monsieur Colbert, you have made a wine fit for the gods.
Well, said Justin, let's not waste time, gentlemen. Your glasses, please. He poured some into everybody's glass before raising his own.
Let's drink, he said, to Monsieur Colbert, his great wines, and the man who discovered them for Happy Mart, Daniel Appleby.
Daniel felt proud as he saw everybody's glasses raised, proud and glad that it was all over. All of a sudden there was a rush to the wine buckets and the sound of loud coughing. Everybody spat out the contents of their glasses with a look of disgust on their faces.
Vinegar, said Justin. Red wine vinegar.
Oui, monsieur, said Colbert. Our latest, the best vinegar made from only the finest red wine, fit for the Emperor Napoleon himself, don't you think? And so it was. The best quality red wine vinegar one could find anywhere. Justin turned to Daniel and stared at him. Justin looked very angry as the specially invited photographers took their pictures. Daniel's face turned pale as he felt his career break into pieces like a glass that has been dropped on a hard floor. The other wine tasters didn't know where to look, though some of them began to laugh. But none laughed as loudly as Monsieur Colbert, whose laughter filled Appleby's ears for the rest of his life.
A nose for a story. "Are you okay, miss?" asked the taxi driver. He could see in his mirror that the American lady sitting in the back seat was having a hard time keeping down her expensive lunch. "No, I am not. What is that awful smell?" the woman asked. The taxi driver smiled to himself. He often had to explain the smell to wealthy foreigners after he had driven them a kilometre or so away from their hotel. It was not something their sensitive city noses were used to. It's just the sewage, miss. The pipes from the toilets are old and the weather is hot in India, he explained. There are many people in Bombay. The pipes get very full. The taxi driver almost felt sorry for his passenger. She was middle-aged, but had a pretty face and shiny dark hair, though her teeth were too big for his taste. Yet he could see, as he closed the windows and switched on the air conditioning, that many men would find her attractive. But he had long since learned to distance himself from the delights of his lady passengers. He thought of himself as a professional, like a doctor. He was above such things. Don't worry, miss. There are no more big sewage pipes in the village where we are going, he added helpfully. Thank God for that, said the woman, who was now beginning to wish she had not asked for the windows to be left open in the first place. No, they use cesspits, big holes in the ground where they put all their— Thank you, driver, the woman said quickly. There's no need to go into details. I can imagine. Desiree Malpin, in fact, had one of the best imaginations in her business. She was a senior journalist for the National Diary, a publication which was proud of being America's #1 magazine for lovers of the truth. Other journalists who wrote for more serious newspapers disagreed. They said that the National Diary loved scandal and dirt, and didn't care how much it changed the truth in its stories. The journalists were right. Lots of pictures and lots of scandal. That was the National Diary's recipe for success, and Desiree was one of the magazine's top writers. The taxi drove on a long way outside the city, until the road became rougher. Finally, it stopped by a small group of houses off the side of the road. This is the place, miss. It's the house to the left, said the driver. He pointed to a house that was slightly larger than the rest and still had some white paint on its walls. But it's so small, Desiree said in surprise. Best house in the village, miss. The family has been there many, many years, said the driver with some pride, as if he knew the famous writer who had lived there, though he had never met her in his life. This was the house of the late Nairi Singh, the former society beauty and writer, whose highly praised novels had been made into several films and who had won the Nobel Prize. Or was it the Pulitzer? Desiree wasn't sure. She had never read any of her books. She knew, however, that Nairi Singh had been killed 2 months ago in a car crash just outside Bombay. Some people said she had been driving to the house of an Indian film star. A married film star. Desiree felt sure that the crash had been no accident. It wouldn't be the first time that such accidents had been arranged. Perhaps there was a jealous wife involved, or maybe an angry relative who could not stand the scandal or embarrassment to the family name. She had a nose for a story, and when Desiree Malpin smelled a story, there would be a story. And if there were no facts behind the story, she would think of some. She looked at the window of the house. A figure was moving. There was somebody still living in Nairi Singh's house. But who? Desiree took a few close-up pictures of the house. She always liked to take her own photographs. They gave a personal touch to her stories and made her some extra money. That's fine. Take me back to the hotel now, driver. I'll come back sometime and take a closer look. And, driver—" "Yes, miss?" "Next time I ask you to open the windows for some fresh air, don't," Desiree said decisively. While Desiree was going back to her hotel in the taxi, Gopal Singh was looking at the old brown photograph of his younger sister, Nairi. It sat on the table next to the sweet-smelling flowers he replaced daily. She looked as he would always remember her, a beautiful young woman whose intelligence shone far beyond her own country. She was only 45 when she died in that car accident, still beautiful, and with so much still to give. She had been respected by artists and politicians all over the world. Yes, he was proud of his sister. But she used to get so angry. He laughed. It was easier to laugh now. Oh, the times they had argued over the company she sometimes kept. Gopal had not always liked the people she mixed with. Still, they had always been there for each other. Neither of them had married. She was married to her work. He had always looked after her, though he would never have admitted it to his proud, brilliant sister who, in many ways, had been a child still. She was too idealistic, only interested in those who shared her ideals. She would argue her opinions with anybody, but her beauty sometimes attracted lovers as well as thinkers. She could not be trusted to look after herself, and who else was there? They were the only ones left of their family. Only he had known Nairi. Only he had understood her ways, her needs, perhaps more than she did herself. And now she was gone. People seemed to want her even more since her death. But it was still Gopal who looked after her memory and her work. He kept away all the journalists and other people who wanted a part of his sister to take away with them. She had given them her work, her wonderful books. Why should they want the part of her that was left to him? The part that was his sister. She had put her life into her work. Wasn't that enough for them? Gopal had always been there for her. Even when she had mixed with the most famous people in India, she had always come back to her faithful brother and their peaceful little home in the village. Always. Now there was a growing number of curious eyes, cars that stopped and looked, tapping on the windows, notes through the door. What did they want? Didn't they know she was dead? But he would stay. He would end his days in the house that held his memories, wrapped in the sweet smell of flowers. What else could he want? The Excelsior Hotel was famous for its quality and luxury. It was the place to stay at if you were at all important or wanted to be thought of as being important. It was always full of foreign journalists. Whenever they were working in Bombay, foreign journalists always chose the Excelsior. Its attraction to journalists was obvious. It was a good place for both valuable information and scandal. Who knows what famous guests might say after too much wine at dinner? And there were always keen listening ears to catch every foolish word or careless whisper. This would later be served up to the world as a tasty dish of scandal in magazines like the National Diary. There were always plenty of readers hungry for details of the lives of famous people, especially if those details were interesting and personal. That was why Desiree Malpin was staying there. That evening at the hotel, Desiree sat at her table in the lounge, looking at the setting sun through the windows. She was pleased with herself. She kept a glass of white wine with her, but drank very little of it. This was what she always did. It meant that she could refuse offers of drinks from interested men while keeping a clear head herself. She was very good at listening to people who first drank too much and then said too much. On the few occasions when the conversation went from the boring to the exciting, she could reach into her handbag and switch on her tiny tape recorder, a very useful machine indeed. Desiree was there to interview one of India's top film directors, Raj Patel. He was about to make a film based on Indian summer, Nairi Singh's last novel. The Indian film industry, centred in Bombay, was becoming popular in the West, where it was sometimes known as Bollywood. Desiree had no interest at all in Indian films or their directors, but her boss had told her that she might find out more about Nairi Singh and her film star lover. If anybody knew him, Patel did. She recognized Patel coming towards her. He was quite old, well over 60. Desiree preferred younger men, and was dressed in an expensive white suit. He was smiling and holding a gin and tonic. Desiree knew that older men were attracted to her. It was useful, though it could be risky if she stayed too long and they became too interested. She could see already that Patel's eyes were attracted by the necklace that sat above the low neckline of her dress. But she could handle herself all right. This guy would be no problem, she could tell. Patel came up to her and smiled. "Miss Malpin, if I'm not mistaken." Desiree held out her hand as she welcomed him. She was expecting a handshake, but Patel took it and gave it a kiss instead. It felt wet. "They didn't tell me you were so handsome, Mr. Patel." "Oh, you know how to please an old man, Miss Malpin," Patel said as he laughed. "But I was surprised when your magazine said it was interested in my latest film production. In fact, I'm pleased that the West is finally taking an interest in Indian cinema." "The whole world knows that you beat Hollywood in getting the rights to film Nairi Singh's last novel, Indian Summer. Naturally, everybody wants to know about it, especially since Nairi Singh's death," said Desiree, as she switched on her tape recorder. "Well, I've always wanted to film Nairi's novels. I think it's best that her work should be filmed by Indians in India." "I hear that Nairi had quite an interest in Indian films and in film stars. Is that right, Mr. Patel?" And so the conversation went on. Raj Patel wanted to talk about his new film, but Desiree wanted to talk about Nairi Singh and kept trying to get him to give away details of her involvement with one of his stars. Throughout it all, Patel simply smiled, drank his gin and tonic, and kept trying to return to the subject of his film. But Desiree was determined, and the subject always went back to Nairi's personal life. Finally, he stood up. "Will you excuse me for a few moments, Miss Malpin? I won't be long." He had a phone call to make that he didn't want her to know about, and he left. Desiree waited and sipped her wine. She was annoyed that the old fool hadn't told her about anything apart from his boring film. He was back half an hour later. He seemed to be a little drunk. Desiree tried not to appear annoyed.
Ah, yes, Miss Malpin. You were interested in Nairi Singh.
Patel's voice was louder than before, and not as clear.
And who can blame you? By the way, that is a most beautiful necklace you are wearing, my dear.
You were saying about Nairi Singh, Desiree reminded him.
Ah, yes, Nairi. Oh, she was a remarkable woman. A woman who could have told the world a lot about the famous people she knew. I knew her well.
Desiree's eyes opened wider. Nairi Singh's secrecy and hatred of publicity had been well known. Really? And did she tell you about her secrets?
Not at all.
Desiree almost got very angry, but decided that silence was the best approach. She was right. But, he continued, leaning over towards Desiree,
she once told me, as her friend, that she kept a diary. If the world only knew the secrets that I have written in this diary, she said to me, they would be shocked.
Shocked? Said Desiree. Patel looked at her with a concerned expression.
Oh, if that diary were shown to the world, I tell you, there would be scandal. Scandal! Some people would be in serious trouble, I tell you. It's a good job her brother keeps it safe, or there would be a lot of respectable public figures who would be...
She has a brother?
Oh, yes. Her older brother, Gopal, her only relation. He was like a father to her. Yes, he has all her things, including that diary. It's safe in his hands. He's just a lonely old man who lives for his memories of his sister. He'll probably get rid of it sooner or later.
Get rid of it? Thought Desiree. Not if I can help it. While Desiree was deep in conversation with Patel, Professor Cyril Whitelaw was enjoying a cool glass of iced lemon tea in his small but comfortable room at the Excelsior. He was celebrating his first day in India by reading Indian Summer, the last novel by Nairi Singh, for the 6th time. He would have to know her works in detail if he was to write a great book about this secretive author's life. His publishers were paying for everything and expected results. He hoped to see the house where she had spent so many years of her life very soon. Who knows what he might find there? Perhaps, and this was his secret hope, he might find some unpublished writings. The thought made him shake with excitement. Whitelaw put down Indian Summer and his lemon tea and got up from his chair. He then played one of his favourite games, looking in the mirror and imagining his face on the back cover of his important future book, Nairi Singh, Secretive Star, the book that would finally make his name as an expert on serious modern literature. The thin face that looked back at him was that of a man of late middle age, with pale red hair and glasses. Its skin was pink from the heat, and was already showing the first signs of sunburn. It needed a shave. He decided to clean himself up and dress for dinner. After that, he would have a drink in the hotel lounge. You never know, he thought. There might be someone out there who knew her. 20 minutes later, he walked into the lounge of the Excelsior, where nobody knew Professor Cyril Whitelaw. At least, not yet.
"My dear Miss Malpin,"
began Patel. "Call me Desiree, please."
"Of course. Desiree, may I please introduce my brightest star, my finest actor and leading man, Ravi Narayan. He's going to star in my new film, Indian Summer. I've always wanted to make a film of my favorite book by my dear friend Nairi Singh, and now I am."
"You naughty man, Raj," said Desiree, giving Patel a playful tap on the wrist. "You didn't tell me we had another good-looking man in the hotel. Why, he's almost as handsome as you." Patel laughed. They all did. It was a game Desiree was good at playing with older men. But this other man was not a day over 40, and yes, he was handsome. But where had she seen him before? Ravi Narayan smiled with white film star teeth and said how pleased he was to meet her. The voice was familiar too. That was when Desiree remembered him. His handsome face had been the only thing that had kept her awake through viewings of Patel's boring films. Her editor had insisted she watch them as preparation for this interview. She was glad she had decided to put on her best perfume after all. Perhaps it had been worth it. Now there was another link with Nairi Singh. Perhaps he had been her film star boyfriend. "I thought that Hollywood was interested in filming that book, Raj. I don't mean to be rude, but why are you making it and not them?" It was a fair question, and Desiree was curious to know the answer.
"It's all thanks to Nairi's brother. He is responsible for all her books now, and he likes my films. He wants the film made in India by Indians, by this Indian."
Patel pointed to himself and laughed loudly. They all laughed. Their conversation was being listened to by a very interested figure with pale red hair and glasses who was sitting by the bar not far away, unnoticed by them, busily writing in a notebook. It was Professor Whitelaw.
"Yes, indeed. I've known him for years," continued Patel. "He's spent his life looking after his sister. He still lives in their old house in the village. Goodness knows, Nairi had enough money to buy a palace, but she insisted on staying there. She said it kept her feet on the ground, but it was Gopal who did that, if you ask me. He's getting old now, though, and his health is getting worse, but he won't move from the place," said Patel.
"So he decides what happens to her books?" asked Desiree.
"Yes, there must be lots of unpublished stuff there, including that diary I mentioned. I'd love to have a look, but Gopal won't let anyone near. He's no fool," said Patel as he gave her a knowing look.
"Neither am I," thought Desiree, who was already making plans to visit Gopal the next day. She was determined to get that diary one way or another.
"But there I go talking about an old man,"
went on Patel,
"when you have handsome Ravi to entertain you. Did I mention he was to star in my next film?"
Handsome Ravi talked about himself for the next hour or two, long after Whitelaw was gone. It soon became clear that Ravi had never even met Nairi Singh, and he didn't seem to notice Desiree's necklace at all. The next morning, Gopal Singh was looking at the rising sun from his bedroom window. He was glad he had agreed to let his old friend Raj film Indian summer. Nairi had always said that foreigners should film her books because only they could see India with a fresh eye. He had always told her that was nonsense. They had argued about it, but what in the end could he say? They were not his books, and that was that. But now he was responsible. He would do what was best, at last. The previous night, Raj had told him on the phone that a silly journalist from that awful National Diary magazine wanted to see him. Raj, as Gopal well knew, had always liked attractive women. His marriage never changed that, but even he knew trouble when he saw it. And Desiree Malpin was trouble, no doubt about that. She was not interested in Indian films, that was for sure, so Raj had, with Gopal's permission, made up a story about a diary full of scandals about important people. Raj had been a good actor in his youth, so, while he was talking to Desiree, he had pretended to be drunk and to be talking too much. He was good at that kind of thing. And she believed every word, just as he had expected her to. Of course, Raj and Gopal both knew that Nairi had never kept a diary in her life. He remembered Gopal once telling him about Nairi's little box of secrets, so he had quickly thought of the plan. They had realized that the filming of Indian summer would attract interest outside India, and not all of it welcome. Desiree Malpin was a good example. Raj told Gopal he could either send her away or he could carry out the joke. If she was more interested in scandal than his films, she should not get any pity. Gopal laughed and told him to go ahead. Good old Raj. Desiree had also got up early that morning. Ravi Narayan had proved to be as good a talker as she was a listener, perhaps better. Old Patel had smiled as he allowed his star to talk and talk and talk. Her cassette had soon finished, and she hadn't got another. She had hoped to catch more details about Nairi Singh and her diary. Oh, yes, there had been a lot mentioned. Famous names, important names from all over the place. When Ravi took a breath and allowed Patel to talk for a while. This had not been often enough to please her, but by then her interest had been awakened. She was sure there was a story, and a big one too. And as for Nairi's death in that so-called car accident, had it really been an accident? There was the smell of scandal there. She just knew it. She had phoned Nairi's brother and told him she wanted to get out quickly to see him. She was sure that old Gopal, or whatever his name was, would be as helpful as Patel had been, especially if he was a lonely old man. How could he refuse an attractive woman like her? The diary would be hers, she was sure of it, even if she had to steal it. She decided she would wear a yellow trouser suit that would allow her to move freely around the place. She wanted to have a good look around when she got there. She looked great in the trouser suit, and her appearance usually helped her get what she wanted. That and lots of nice perfume, of course. One had to smell nice. 5 minutes later, she was on her way in a taxi. She had all the windows closed. Later that morning, Gopal Singh went out to change the flowers for fresh ones from the garden. The house needed the sweet smell. It had not been joined to the sewage system. It was an old house and still had no modern pipes. Waste was collected every month from a cesspit some distance away in the large garden. The cesspit was about 2 meters wide and over 1 meter deep, and by the end of the month, as it was now, it smelled awful. But he was used to it. As he walked down the garden, he saw a man approaching, a middle-aged European man with glasses and pale red hair.
"Mr. Singh," said the man, "may I have a word with you? It's about your sister."
Gopal was always polite to visitors, if he liked the look of them. This man didn't look as if he meant any harm. He decided to speak with him. Professor Whitelaw introduced himself, and they were soon sitting in the house, drinking tea next to the new flowers. Whitelaw explained about his plans for a book about Nairi.
"It will be mostly about her work, you understand," he said rather nervously.
"Not about my sister's private life, I hope. Nairi was a very private person, and I want that to be respected, even now," Gopal said firmly.
"I would never mention anything without your permission, sir," the professor said. "This will be the kind of book students of serious literature will read, I assure you."
Gopal felt happier when he heard this. Nairi had always attracted both students and teachers of literature, and there had to be a book sooner or later. It was bound to happen. When he heard Whitelaw tell him about his plans to write a book that would celebrate her work, rather than the details of her private life, he knew that it would probably be the first of many. Gopal also knew that he was getting older and might not be able to control the things that were written about Nairi. If he insisted on having a considerable degree of control over the finished book, he could make sure that what was written was the truth and not the rubbish that some would like to publish about her. Besides, Whitelaw seemed to be honest.
"And what kind of information about my sister are you looking for, Professor Whitelaw?"
Gopal asked.
"I'm particularly interested in any unpublished work you might have. Any notes, unfinished novels, letters, diaries, perhaps."
Diaries? Gopal wondered if this was another of Raj's jokes. But Raj had made no mention of this man. Then there was a knock at the door. Gopal opened it. There was an attractive woman in a yellow trouser suit standing there. She was smiling and carried a handbag. He could smell her perfume. This must be the woman from the National Diary. Gopal smiled and let her in. Desiree thought the old man was smiling for a different reason. "He's attracted to me," she thought to herself. "I knew he would be." Gopal introduced Whitelaw, and Desiree's heart sank when she saw him. She was not glad to hear of his plans for a book. He would be as interested in scandal as she was. Maybe she could take his mind off the diary. She put on her sweetest voice, but Whitelaw did not react as she had hoped. He didn't look once as she leaned over while reaching for some tea. She might just as well have been his mother. No luck there. At least the old man seemed to be giving her his attention. She explained, still in her sweetest voice, why she was there. She said that she wanted to describe the human side of Nairi Singh in her magazine, the side that would show the world what a wonderful person they had lost. Was there anything that he could show her readers? Letters? A diary, perhaps? Gopal smiled. "Come, let us all walk together in the garden. Then we can talk," he said. Gopal picked up an old metal box from a table, the kind with a lid and a lock, and carried it with him. He led them past the flowers by his sister's photograph and out to the garden path. There was an unpleasant smell. At first, the smell was not too bad. Then, as they went on, it got stronger. "My sister was a secretive woman," said Gopal. "She knew many important people, many famous people, but she never said anything about her private conversations with them to me or to anyone. She respected her friends, even her enemies, and would never repeat to anyone what they said to her." As they walked, the smell became almost too much. Desiree's face was turning pale, and Professor Whitelaw, too, was looking very uncomfortable. Gopal went on. "This box contains the only real secrets my sister ever kept from me. I once promised her I would never open it, and I never have, even though I have the key." He stopped and looked at his two guests, who were both trying their best not to be sick. "This cesspit, which you see in the ground in front of us, is to be emptied tomorrow. It contains the sewage from the past month." They could see it in front of them. It was almost full, and the smell rose from it like an evil ghost. Then Gopal did an extraordinary thing. He threw the box into the cesspit. It went through the air and landed in the middle. Desiree and Whitelaw looked on helplessly while the box sank slowly to the bottom, leaving only a few bubbles in the brown liquid. "If you really wish to know the secrets in that box, they are yours. I will be at the Excelsior this afternoon. In fact, my good friend Mr. Raj Patel will be arriving to take me there at any moment. The person who brings me the box may collect the key from me in the lounge of the hotel at 4 o'clock this afternoon, just in time for tea. Goodbye for now, my friends. It was a delight meeting you both. Perhaps we shall meet again." And Gopal walked down the garden path and left them there. Their eyes went from him to the cesspit and then to each other. Both of them wanted the box and what was in it, and there it lay, separated from them by deep, bubbling, brown sewage. Raj Patel and Gopal sat drinking tea in the Excelsior lounge at 3:45 that afternoon. Music from a string quartet was playing. As they laughed together, a third person came to join them. It was Professor Whitelaw. "I'm sorry, Mr. Singh, but I just couldn't do it. Not for anything. I'm afraid I have rather a weak stomach. Still, I don't suppose anything in that box would have made much difference to a book about Miss Singh as a writer." Gopal smiled. "Quite right. Think nothing of it, Professor Whitelaw. I hope you did not mind my little test of your, intentions. I can see you are a man with high standards. Now, do sit down and join us for tea. Let me introduce you to my good friend, Mr. Raj Patel. He is a very fine maker of Indian films." For the next 10 minutes, they all chatted about Whitelaw's ideas for his book and Raj Patel's plans for Indian Summer, starring Ravi Narayan. It was almost 4 o'clock when Desiree Malpin arrived with an old metal box in her hands. She was wearing a loose blue dress and smelled of strong perfume. But there was another smell mixed in with it, a bitter, unpleasant smell, which defeated all the efforts of the perfume to hide it. Her hair was still wet, as though she had just come out of the shower. She smiled, but it was an angry smile. She placed the box in the middle of the table, almost knocking over the vase of roses.
"Well, Mr. Singh, here it is. I got it out. None of those taxi drivers would do it, so I did it myself. Ruined my clothes and had to pay for the damned taxi to be cleaned. God knows what they thought when I finally got back here. But here it is. Now, are you going to open it?"
"Of course, my dear. At once," said Gopal. He took a key from his pocket and didn't seem to mind that the box was not entirely clean. He turned the lock with a quick motion of his wrist and held the box out to her. "Take it. It's yours." Desiree took the box and, looking very pleased with herself, opened it. She took out some old pieces of newspaper, which had gone brown and hard with age. She looked at them and stared at Gopal angrily.
"What on earth are these?"
Gopal Singh looked at the old papers.
"Cricket reports. Oh, we both loved cricket, but I hate reading results of matches I haven't seen, and Nairi loved collecting them. She was a sweet old thing, don't you think?"